Hello, everybody. This is Devin from the Host Broker. I'll be bringing you a presentation today called What Makes a Winning MSP Buyer. And I want to put together this presentation because the reality is the marketplace for MSP acquisitions is very competitive, and the number of buyers outweighs the number of sellers by several orders of magnitude. And I'm not sure if all buyers fully appreciate this. And in order to compete in this marketplace, there are certain aspects that buyers should be focusing in on to give themselves the best chance. Otherwise, their offers and their own positioning are just not going to be competitive compared to some of the other buyers who are active in this space. So I'm going to be walking through some of the traits that we see for MSP buyers who actually complete successful transactions. So the first one, and is to make a great first impression. And I realize this is almost like a platitude, it almost goes without saying, but you would be surprised how often when I'm on a first call between a buyer and a seller, the buyer is not putting their best foot forward. And the first thing is just to make sure that you show up to that first meeting on time. Again, if you show up 5 to 10 minutes late, it's just going to create this impression that you're not a serious, organized buyer. And it happens a lot, and it really creates that bad first impression. And then once you're on the call, make it obvious that you've done your homework. So ask questions that are specific to the confidential information memorandum, specific to the seller's income statement. Show that you've checked out their website, and really make sure that you show that you're doing your homework. Sometimes we'll see buyers who are quite obviously winging it when it comes to that first call, essentially reviewing the materials on the fly as the seller is sitting there, kind of just wondering why they're wasting their time with this buyer. So make sure that it is obvious that you have done your homework. And also make sure that you're responsive. So after the call, if there are agreed upon action items, make sure that you follow through quickly. If you say you're going to put together some more questions to follow up by email, make sure that you send those through within a day or two. If you're going to say you're going to put forward an offer, do it along the time frame that you indicate. And the other thing is just to make sure that you prioritize building a rapport on the initial call. Recognize that for a seller, this is going to be one of the likely the biggest decisions they're ever going to make in their entire life. A lot of sellers have been operating their business for 20, 30 years or more. It is their baby. They care very much about their clients. They care very much about their team. And they want to make sure that there is a good home for them. And so it's the softer aspects of the deal that sometimes buyers will overlook. And so make sure that you build that rapport earlier on so the seller can have confidence that you're the type of person that they want to take over and to be in charge of their team and their clients. The next thing is just making sure you bring realistic expectations to the table. These days, there's a lot of resources out there for people who are looking to buy a business. There are YouTube courses and things like that. And sometimes those sort of materials can lead buyers astray, especially when they're a new buyer. So make sure that you come to the table with some expectations that are aligned with the marketplace for MSPs in particular, especially recognizing how competitive the industry is. So the first thing is the market value. Understand that valuations are based off of multiples of EBITDA. You should have an idea of what those typical multiples will look like. You should also understand what sort of factors might increase a typical multiple or decrease it for that matter. And if you would like to get like a basic idea of this, I would encourage you to Google MSP valuation calculator. We have a calculator on our website which does a pretty good job of presenting an estimate for what market value is like. So at least you can be in the right ballpark when you're making inquiries. The other is just to understand conventional deal terms. So a lot of these kind of the YouTube buy a business courses will really overestimate the value of sellers notes or sellers financing. The idea is you can buy a business with $0 down. Well, maybe in other industries, but certainly not for MSPs. You need to understand that the majority of the valuation for MSP transactions is paid upon cash at close. It is common to have earnouts. Sellers notes are common as well. But the vast majority of the time, like you're looking at 60 to 80% of the valuation is paid in cash at closing. Also understand normal timelines. So, MSP transactions can take anywhere from 60 to 180 days. Oftentimes, new buyers will underestimate the amount of time it will take. This is especially true if they're using an SBA loan as their funding source. SBA loans do take a long time, um, and there's just more of a process involved. And so if you're coming to a seller and saying that you can close on your transaction in 30 days, we're gonna be using an SBA loan, it's just a red flag from the seller for the seller's perspective. And it'd be much more credible to be on the higher end of that 60 to 180 days if you are using an SBA loan. Third thing is to try to demonstrate a proven track record. Again, these sellers really want to make sure that their team and that their clients land in good hands. So, how you can demonstrate a proven track record is different for different types of buyers. If you're an existing MSP, and maybe you haven't done transactions in the past, you could still demonstrate that you are, a credible business that has happy clients. Like maybe you have good Google reviews, maybe you have testimonials on your website, that sort of thing. And that will just, demonstrate to the seller that their clients are going to be happy. Similarly, maybe you can talk a little bit about your company culture, the benefits that you have for your employees, your track record for retaining employees, which will give some comfort to the seller about their employees being transitioned into into an environment that will be good for them as well. If you're a private equity buyer, you can demonstrate a proven track record in terms of successful transactions, especially if you have done a roll up that has, successfully gone to market and sold. That is a huge plus for sellers who are looking for that sort of thing. And maybe you could give access to some of the previous sellers that you have worked with, and allow the seller to talk to some references, essentially, to give that level of comfort. For private equity buyers, the biggest concern, um, from a seller's perspective, is that the transaction is going to go poorly post closing, and that the experience is going to become worse for clients and for the employees. So, the extent that you can mitigate that by talking about your successes and making references available will really help. And if you're like a first time buyer, you don't have an MSP yet, then maybe you could at least talk about yourself or the rest of your team members, and your relevant experience in the MSP industry or in related industries. So, maybe you've worked in IT for large corporations, maybe you've worked for an MSP vendor. Maybe you just have overall a solid background in technology. Come ready to speak to that, because from a seller's perspective, you're going to be at a big disadvantage if you're not already experienced in the MSP industry, like direct, like you don't already have an MSP or you haven't done transactions with MSPs before. So you need to try to mitigate that just by speaking to your own experience to try to give as much comfort as possible to the seller. This is a tricky one because you're never going to be able to mitigate this to the extent that it's going to be an advantage for you. The MSP buyers and the private equity buyers are going to have a competitive advantage over you, but you can at least mitigate it somewhat by speaking to your related experience. Fourth trait is to be straightforward. Complexity really does kill all deals. So, you want to have a straightforward negotiation. This is not, the equivalent of buying, sunglasses off a beach in Mexico here. Like, we're not looking to do, a KG sort of a negotiation. put your best foot forward, make a strong offer, make your offer clear, and then act in good faith. Of course, with a lot of these transactions, there is a back and forth, there is a negotiation. But you don't want to be kind of cagey about it. Like, make it straightforward, because the rest of the buyers, who get deals done tend to do that. And if the seller kind of gains wind that, you know, that you're being a little bit underhanded or a little bit sneaky, it's gonna, not lend to a lot of trust and put you at a disadvantage compared to some of the other buyers who are more straightforward. Also, just have a simple deal structure, make it easy to understand. So lay it out in terms of, this is the amount of cash at close, this is the amount tied to seller's financing or earnouts. Here's the timeline for when those future payments will be made. State if there's an interest rate or not. Keep it simple. If the deal terms are complex, if there's kind of too many if then statements baked into it, then it's just going to make it too hard to understand. Sellers are going to opt towards a more simple structure that they can count on to a greater degree. So definitely put forward a simple deal structure. It will benefit you there. And the other thing is just be straightforward in terms of not retrading of your offers. If you put forward an IOI, it should carry forward into the stage where there's an LOI issued as well. You don't want to kind of bait and switch and put forward a really attractive IOI only for your LOI to come in at a much lower valuation. Now, of course, if you do uncover any information that's material between the IOI and the LOI, or for that matter, between the LOI and the purchase agreement, it is, of course, fair game to adjust your offer. But make sure that you have a pretty strong grasp on the business before you even make any sort of an offer, and then try to stick to that unless there is something material that is discovered. As soon as you start to try to negotiate your offer, it is going to, I should say, negotiate an offer that's already been agreed to. It is going to upset the seller. It might kill the deal. It would probably make the transition more awkward if it does move forward. And frankly, it's just going to, kind of hurt your reputation in this space. So uh, make sure you're straightforward, and if you put forward an offer, stick to it. And lastly is just to stay organized and to be prepared. So recognizing that there are so many buyers out there, and there are buyers who are really looking to move quickly when they see an acquisition opportunity that they like, make sure that you have a funding source in place. Like, if you're working with an SBA lender, try to get pre-qualified. Or if you're using, private funds, be prepared to demonstrate, the proof of funds so the seller can be comfortable with that. Make sure that you have an advisory team in place. So specifically, an attorney who is experienced in M&A, ideally experienced in M&A for MSPs. You don't want to use your real estate attorney or anything like that. Like, it really needs to be specific to M&A. And similarly, make sure that you have a tax advisor who can, help you navigate that the tax side of the transaction, so there's no surprises there. Sometimes new buyers will try to skip out on having, especially an M&A attorney, and instead they hope that they can use, kind of templates online for the purchase agreement, and to save themselves on some legal expenses. And I would highly suggest that, it's not worthwhile to do that. Yes, you'll be saving on some legal expenses. Yes, M&A attorneys are expensive, but they're also crucial for the process. And if you uh, don't have that in place, then it's gonna reflect poorly on you. It's gonna make the transaction longer than it should be, and ultimately it could give the seller an uneasy feeling that makes them want to pull out, if they feel like you're not being serious about it, and not putting skin in the game by investing into your attorney there. So that one is really important. And if you need any referrals to that extent, you can contact us and we can put you in touch with somebody who can take good care of you. And also just having some definitions in place and some regarding transition plans. So the ability to show like a clear roadmap for what you're going to be looking for during due diligence, during integration, how you're going to handle the handoff. And some of it is really basic, but like, are you going to keep the brand of the business you're acquiring? How are you going to incorporate the brand with your existing brand? How are you going to handle the team and managing the team if if you're going to be working kind of remotely with them, if there's satellite offices. So having all those plans in place ahead of time, you can do that homework before you even look at a particular acquisition and put those into some documents so that when the seller is asking for what your plans are, you have something ready to go. So with all that in mind, I have a few pieces of advice for first-time buyers. It is really challenging doing your first acquisition in this space, in particular if you don't already have an MSP or you haven't done acquisitions in the past in the MSP space if you're a private equity firm. But there's just a few things that you should keep in mind is control what you can control. So, you can be prepared, you can be responsive, you can be professional, you can focus on building that rapport. Um, and focus on those things and like try not to dwell too much on what you can't really compete on, which is, if you don't already have an MSP, then you're just not going to be able to demonstrate, a proven track record like an existing MSP would. So, focus on the aspects that you can control and make sure that you really button up those aspects. The second one is don't wait for the perfect opportunity. If you're looking for an MSP that is in your perfect geographic market, that is the perfect size with the perfect tech stack, there are just not going to be a lot of those that come along. So, you need to figure out what's your nice to haves and then what's your, hard requirements. And I would suggest making the hard requirement list like pretty short, and then try to inquire on some listings that maybe aren't perfect fits, because the likelihood of you closing the first few deals that you look at is quite low. So it's helpful to kind of take the opportunity to learn by making some inquiries. You can talk to some sellers, get a feel for the process, run some questions by your attorney, by your lender, etc. And that opportunity to learn will be really valuable when you do find an opportunity that is a better fit for you. So yeah, don't wait around. You just won't, the sample size is not going to be large enough for you to learn sufficiently to overcome some of these challenges, and it is helpful to take the opportunity to do so, even if it's not a perfect fit. Then lastly is be prepared to overpay or de-risk for the seller. And so recognizing that as a first-time buyer, you are going to be at a disadvantage. There are going to be a bunch of different offers that are being received from buyers who are more qualified than you, who do have that proven track record. The obvious ways that you can overcome this are to either overpay in terms of the market value, or to try to make the deal terms more favorable to the seller. So, reduce the amount that is the amount of the valuation is tied to an earnout, increase the amount that's paid at closed, and that will help you overcome some of those challenges. And recognizing that this isn't ideal here. It is. Um, I'm not suggesting that you 100% need to overpay, but uh, the reality is that if you want to try to find an opportunity that you can actually land, you might need to tighten your pencils a little bit there, and uh, to try to get that dollar value up above some of the more qualified offers that will be received. So thanks so much for listening to the presentation today. If you are interested in working with the host broker, you can register for free at www.thehostbroker.com. You'll get access to all of our current listings, and you will also be subscribed to our weekly mailing list, which goes out on Wednesdays and has all the new listings and updates on our existing listings. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me at devin@thehostbroker.com. And if you like this content, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.